Hello, Reading Room. We are here on day 2 of the Pilgrim's Regress, which we know is a rewriting, but much easier, I think, to understand. Certainly do appreciate the updated version, that's for sure. And C.S. Lewis is well respected, so it feels good to have an update on John Bunyan's, not Paul Bunyan's, John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. And knowing also that it's got this moral message because it's an allegory, and that you are updating it, and it was popular. So you're updating a moral allegory in order for it to be more relatable. That's really, and that's what C.S. Lewis is known for. So I just really, yeah. I never know the word I'm looking for right there, except for hats off. For Pete's sake. Oh my gosh. C.S. Lewis, hats off. But we're here on day 2, and I don't have the book. I looked out there to see if the book might be sitting there. I have to look. I know I have to do the whatever, because it could be out there. Hope maybe it'll be here by Thanksgiving. Who knows? Who knows? You know, it is... I have to say, for people who don't mind making the extra money on the holidays, it's so weird to me, but I like the busy. I know, like, hello. I like because it is kind of like a Pilgrim's Progress or Regress. I bet that's sort of what the day is like for a driver. I bet it is. I bet it absolutely is. Now, there's somebody who's got a story. I don't believe everybody has a story, but some of you drivers, you definitely have a story. Absolutely. Keep 5 years worth of a journal going on there, and you have got a story. I'm pretty sure I told that to my students one time. I don't tell them all the great gems all the time. That's why they come back. Okay, let's get going. I don't think, I must have it ready. No, I don't. And it's probably not the best preview to be giving everybody. That was a really great reading from a table of, the Table of Nations and the Origins of Race. So you just need to see that. But yes, it is an, I believe it's Tim Osterholm is not a Palestinian name, but you know. There is John Bunyan. Oh, it doesn't ever switch over. That just sucks. Okay, but we're not reading from that anyway. But I will take a look at that. So here's how the book, the Paul Bunyan book, starts, and you can download it. It's not Paul Bunyan, it's John Bunyan. This is The Pilgrim's Progress. And here's the map for The Pilgrim's Progress. So how about that? It's not a very good picture. That's the best picture you're going to get. That's not what I meant to do, darn it. There we go. I meant to cut over to here. And let's take a look at what I actually do have up, which is Safari. There we go. And so I went back to the beginning here. This is as best as I can get it. That does not move. That picture does not move anywhere, but that's okay. And there is no download either. Okay? But that's okay. We're reading and it's working out. And then I'll have the book. So we are on book number 2. Thrill. Thou shalt not make to thyself any graven image, nor the likeness of anything that is in the heaven above. Exodus. The soul of man, therefore, desiring to learn what manner of things these are, casteth her eyes upon objects akin to herself, whereof none sufficeth. And then it is that she saith, with the Lord, and with the things whereof I spoke, there is nothing in that likeness. What then is it like? This is the question, O son of Dionysius, that is the cause of all evils, or rather the travail wherein the soul travelleth about it. From Plato. Following false copies of the good that no sincere fulfillment of their promise make. Dante. In hand she boldly took to make another like the former dame, another florimel in shape and look, so lively and so like that many it mistook. Spencer, who was in our 60 people who changed the church. Spencer. Dixit incipiens. Still I lay dreaming in bed and looked and saw John go plodding along the road westward in the bitter black of a frost night. He walked so long that the morning broke. Then presently John saw a little inn by the side of the road, and a woman with a broom who had opened the door and was sweeping out the rubbish. So he turned in there and called for a breakfast, and while it was cooking, he sat down in a hard chair by the newly lit fire and fell asleep. When he woke, the sun was shining in through the window, and there was his breakfast laid. Another traveler was already eating. He was a big man with red hair and a red stubble on all his 3 chins, buttoned up very tight. When they had both finished, the traveler rose and cleared his throat and stood with his back to the fire. Then he cleared his throat again and said, "A fine morning, young sir." "Yes, sir," said John. "You are good west, perhaps, young man." "You are going west, perhaps, young man." I think so. "It is possible that you don't know me. I am a stranger here." "No offense," said the stranger. "My name is Mr. Enlightenment, and I believe it is pretty generally known. I shall be happy to give you my assistance and protection as far as our ways lie together." John thanked him very much for this, and when they went out from the inn there was a neat little trap waiting, with a fat little pony between the shafts, and its eyes were so bright and its harness so well polished that it was difficult to say which was twinkling the keener in the morning sunshine. They both got into the trap, and Mr. Enlightenment whipped up the little fat pony, and they went bowling along the road as if nobody had a care in the world. Presently they began to talk. "And where might you come from, my fine lad?" said Mr. Enlightenment. "From Puritania, sir," said John. "A good place to leave, eh?" "I am so glad you think that," cried John. "I was afraid—" "I hope I am a man of the world," said Mr. Enlightenment. "Any young fellow who is anxious to better himself may depend on finding sympathy and support in me. Puritania! Why, I suppose you have been brought up to be afraid of the landlord." "Well, I must admit, I sometimes do feel rather nervous." "You may make your mind easy, my boy. There is no such person. There is no landlord. There is absolutely no such thing. I might even say no such entity in existence. There never have been and never will be. And is this absolutely certain? Cried John, for a great hope was rising in his heart. Absolutely certain. Look at me, young man. I ask you, do I look as if I was easily taken in? Oh, no, said John hastily. I was just wondering, though. I mean, how did they all come to think there was such a person? The landlord is an invention of those stewards, all made up to keep the rest of us under their thumb, and of course the stewards are hand in glove with the police. They are a shrewd lot, those stewards. They know those stewards. They know which side their bread is buttered on, all right. Clever fellows, damn me, I can't help admiring them. But do you mean that the stewards don't believe it themselves? I dare say they do. It is just the sort of cock and bull story they would believe. They are simple old souls, most of them just like children. They have no knowledge of modern science, and they would believe anything they were told. John was silent for a few minutes. Then he began again. But how do you know there is no landlord? Christopher Columbus, Galileo, the earth is round, invention of printing, gunpowder, exclaimed Mr. Enlightenment in such a loud voice that the pony shied. I beg your pardon, said John. Said Mr. Enlightenment. I didn't quite understand, said John. Why, it's as plain as pikestaff, said the other. Your people in Puritania believe in the landlord because they have not had the benefits of scientific training. For example, I dare say it would be news to you to hear that the earth was round. Round as an orange, my lad. Well, I don't know that it would, said John, feeling a little disappointed. My father always said it was round. No, no, my dear boy, said Mr. Enlightenment. You must have misunderstood him. It is well known that everyone in Puritania thinks that the earth is flat. It is not likely that I should be mistaken on such a point. Indeed, it is out of the question. Then again, there is the paleontological evidence. What's that? Why, they tell you in Puritania that the landlord made all these roads, but that is quite impossible, for old people can remember the time when the roads were not nearly so good as they are now. And what is more, scientists have never found all over the country the traces of old roads running in quite different directions. The inference is obvious. John said nothing. I said, repeated Mr. Enlightenment, that the inference was obvious. Oh, yes, yes, of course, said John hastily, turning a little red. Then again, there is anthropology. I'm afraid I don't know. Bless me, of course you don't. They don't mean you to know. An anthropologist is a man who goes around your backyard villages in these parts collecting the odd stories that the country people tell about the landlord. Why, there is one village where they think he is a trunk like an elephant. Now, anyone can see that that couldn't be true. It is very unlikely. And what is better still, we know how the villagers came to think so. It all began by an elephant escaping from the local zoo, and then some old villager, he was probably drunk, saw it wandering about on the mountain one night, and so the story grew up that the landlord had a trunk. Did they catch the elephant again? Did who? The anthropologist. Oh, my dear boy, you are misunderstanding. This happened long before there were any anthropologists. Then how do they know? Well, as to that, I see that you have a very crude notion of how science actually works. To put it simply, for of course you could not understand the technical explanation. To put it simply, they know that the escaped elephant must have been the source of the trunk story, because they know that an escaped snake must have been that. This is called the inductive method. Hypothesis, my dear young friend, establishes itself by a cumulative process, or, to use popular language, if you make the same guess often enough, it ceases to be a guess and becomes a scientific fact. After he had thought for a while, John said, I think I see. Most of the stories about the landlord are probably untrue. Therefore, the rest are probably untrue. Well, that is as near as a beginner can get to it, perhaps. But when you have had a scientific training, you will find that you can be quite certain about all sorts of things which now seem to you only probable. By this time, the fat little pony had them several miles, and they had come to a place where a by-road went off to the right. If you are going west, we must part here, said Mr. Enlightenment, drawing up, unless perhaps you would care to come home with me. You see that magnificent city? John looked down by the by-road and saw in a flat plain without any trees a huge collection of corrugated iron huts, most of which seemed rather old and rusty. That, said Mr. Enlightenment, is the city of Claptrap. You will hardly believe me when I say that I can remember it as a miserable village. When I first came here, it had only 40 inhabitants. It now boasts a population of 12,400,361 souls, who include, I may add, the majority of our most influential publicists and scientific popularizers. In this unprecedented development, I am proud to say that I have borne no small part, but it is no mock modesty to add that the invention of the printing press has been more important than any merely personal agency, if you would care to join us. Well, thank you, said John, but I think I will keep to the main road a little longer. He got out of the trap and turned to bid goodbye to Mr. Enlightenment. Then a sudden thought came into his head, and he said, I am not sure that I have really understood all your arguments, sir. It is absolutely certain that there is no landlord. Absolutely. I give you my word of honor. With these words, they shook hands. Mr. Enlightenment turned the pony's head up by the by-road, gave it a touch with the whip, and in a few moments was out of sight. Chapter 2, The Hill. Then I saw John bounding forward on his road so lightly that before he knew it, he had come to the top of the hill. It was not because the hill had tired him that he stopped there, but because he was too happy to move. There is no landlord, he cried. Such a weight had been lifted from his mind that he felt he could fly. All round him the frost was gleaming like silver. The sky was like blue glass. A robin sat in the hedge beside him. A cock was crowing in the distance. There is no landlord. He laughed when he thought of the old card of rules hung over his bed in the bedroom, so low and dark in his father's house. There is no landlord. There is no black hole. He turned and looked back on the road he had come by, and when he did so, he gasped with joy. For there in the east, under the morning light, he saw the mountains heaped up to the sky like clouds, green and violet and dark red. Shadows were passing over the big rounded slopes, and water shone in the mountain pools, and up at the highest of all the sun was smiling steadily on the ultimate crags. These crags were indeed so shaped that you could easily take them for a castle, and now it came into John's head that he had never looked at mountains before, because as long as he thought that the landlord lived there, he had been afraid of them. But now that there was no landlord, he perceived that they were beautiful. For a moment, he almost doubted whether the island could be more beautiful, and whether he would be not wiser to go east instead of west. But it did not seem to him to matter, for he said, if the world has the mountain at one end and the island at the other, then every road leads to beauty, and the world is a glory among glories. At that moment, he saw a man walking up the hill to meet him. Now I knew in my dream that this man's name was Mr. Virtue, and he was about an age with John, or a little older. What is the name of this place? Said John. It is called Jehovah Jireh, said Mr. Virtue. Then they both turned and continued their journey to the west. After they had gone a little way, Mr. Virtue stole a glance at John's face, and then he smiled a little. Why do you smile? Said John. I was thinking that you looked very glad. So would you be if you had lived in the fear of a landlord all your life and had just discovered that you were a free man. Oh, is that it? Oh, it's that, is it? You don't believe in the landlord, do you? I know nothing about him except by hearsay, like the rest of us. You wouldn't like to be under his thumb. Wouldn't like? I wouldn't be under anyone's thumb. You might have to if he had a black hole. I'd let him put me in the black hole sooner than take orders if the orders were not to my mind. Why, I think you are right. I can hardly believe it yet that I need not obey the rules. There's the robin again, to think that I could have a shot at it if I liked and no one would interfere with me. Do you want to? I'm not sure that I do, said John, fingering his sling. But when he stood round on the sunshine and remembered his great happiness and looked twice at the bird, he said, No, I don't. There is nothing I want less. Still, I could if I liked. If you mean you could if you chose, what's the difference? All the difference in the world. A little southward. I thought that John would have questioned him further, but now they came in sight of a woman who was walking slower than they, so that presently they came up with her and wished her good day. When she turned, they saw that she was young and comely, though a little dark of complexion. She was friendly and frank, but not wanton like the brown girls, and the whole world became pleasanter to the young men because they were traveling the same way with her. But first they told her their names, and she told them hers, which was Media Halfways. And where are you traveling to, Mr. Virtue? She asked. To travel hopefully is better than to arrive, said Virtue. Do you mean you are just out for a walk? Just for exercise? Certainly not, said Virtue, who was becoming a little confused. I am on a pilgrimage. I must admit now that you press me. I have not a very clear idea of the end, but that is not the important question. These speculations don't make one a better walker. The great thing is to do one's 30 miles a day. Why? Because that is the rule. Ho, ho, said John. So you do believe in the landlord after all? Not at all. I didn't say it was the landlord's rule. Whose is it then? It is my own rule. I made it myself. But why? Well, that again is a speculative question. I have made the best rules I can. If I find any better ones, I shall adopt them. In the meantime, the great thing is to have rules of some sort and keep them. And where are you going? Said Media, turning to John. Then John began to tell his companions about the island and how he had first seen it and was determined to give up everything for the hope of finding it. Then you had better come and see my father, said she. He lives in the city of Thrill, and at the bottom of this hill there is a turn to the left, which will bring us there in half an hour. Has your father been to the island? Does he know the way? He often talks about something very like it. You had better come with us, Virtue, said John, since you do not know where you are going, and there can be no place to go than the island. Certainly not, said Virtue. We must keep on the road. We must keep on. I don't see why, said John. I dare say you don't, said Virtue. All this time they were going down the hill, and now they came to a little grassy lane on the left, which went off through a wood. Then I thought that John had a little hesitation, but partly because the sun was now hot and the hard metal of the road was becoming sore to his feet, and partly because he felt a little angry with Virtue, and most of all because Media was going that way, he decided to turn down the lane. They said goodbye to Virtue, and he went on his way, stumping up the next hill without ever looking back. Soft going. When they were in the lane, they walked more gently. The grass was soft under their feet, and the afternoon sun beating down on the sheltered place made it warm, and presently they heard a sound of sweet and melancholy chimes. Those are the bells of the city, said Medea. As As they went on, they walked closer together, and soon they were walking arm in arm. Then they kissed each other, and after that they went on their way, kissing and talking in slow voices of sad and beautiful things, and the shadow of the wood, and the sweetness of the girl, and the sleepy sound of the bells reminded John a little bit of the island and a little bit of the brown girls. "This is what I have been looking for all my life," said John. "The brown girls were too gross and the island was too fine. This is the real thing. This is love," said Medea, with a deep sigh. "This is the way to the real island." Then I dreamed that they came in sight of the city, very old and full of spires and turrets, all covered with ivy, where it lay in a little grassy valley built on both sides of a lazy winding river. And they passed the gate in the ruinous old city wall and came and knocked at a certain door and were let in. Then Medea brought him into a darkish room with a vaulted roof and windows of stained glass, and exquisite food was brought to them. With the food came old Mr. Halfways. He was a gliding gentleman with soft silver hair and a soft silver voice, dressed in flowing robes, and he was so solemn with his long beard that John was reminded of the steward with his mask on. But it was much better than the steward, thought John, because there is nothing to be afraid of. Also, he doesn't need a mask. His face is really like that. Leah for Rachel. As they ate, John told him about the island. "You will find your island here," said Mr. Halfway, looking into John's eyes. "But how can it be here in the middle of the city? It needs no place. It is everywhere and nowhere. It refuses entry to none who ask. It is an island of the soul," said the old gentleman. "Surely, even in Puritania, they told you that the landlord's castle was within you." "But I don't want the castle," said John, "and I don't believe in the landlord." What is truth?" said the old man. "They were mistaken when they told you of the landlord, and yet they were not mistaken. What the imagination seizes as beauty must be truth, whether it existed before or not. The landlord they dream to find, we find in our hearts. The island you seek for, you already inhabit. The children of the country are never far from their fatherland." When the meal was ended, the old gentleman took a harp, and at the first sweep of his hand across the strings, John began to think of the music that he had heard by the window in the wall. Then came the voice, and it was no longer merely silver sweet and melancholy like Mr. Halfway's speaking voice, but strong and noble and full of strange overtones. The noise of the sea and of all birds, and sometimes of wind and thunder. And John began to see a picture of the island with his eyes open. But it was more than a picture, for he sniffed the spicy smell and the sharp brine of the sea mixed with it. He seemed to be in the water only a few yards from the sand of the island. He could see more than he had ever seen before, but just as he had put down his feet and touched a sand bottom and was beginning to wade ashore, the song ceased. The whole vision went away. John found himself back in the dusky room, seated on a low divan with Medea by his side. "Now I shall sing you something else," said Mr. Halfways. "Oh no," cried John, who was sobbing. "Sing the same again. Please sing it again. You had better not hear it twice in the same evening. I have plenty of other songs." "I would die to hear the first one again," said John. "Well, well," said Mr. Halfways, "perhaps you know best. Indeed, what does it matter? It is as short to the island one way as another." Then he smiled indulgently and shook his head, and John could not help thinking that his talking voice and talking manner were almost silly after the singing. But as soon as the great deep wail of the music began again, it swept everything else from his mind. It seemed to him that this time he got more pleasure from the first few notes, and even noticed delicious passages which had escaped him in the first hearing, and he said to himself, "This is going to be even better than the other. I shall keep my head this time and sip all the pleasure at my ease." I saw that he settled himself more comfortably to listen And Media slipped her hand into his. It pleased him to think that they were going to the island together. Now came the vision of the island again, but this time it was changed, for John scarcely noticed the island because of a lady with a crown on her head who stood waiting for him on the shore. She was fair, divinely fair. At last, said John, a girl with no trace of brown, and he began again to wade ashore, holding out his arms to embrace that queen, and his love for her appeared to him so great and so pure, and they had parted for so long that his pity for himself and her almost overwhelmed him. And as he was about to embrace her, the song stopped. Sing it again, cried John. I liked it better the second time. Well, if you insist, Mr. Halfways, with a shrug. It is nice to have a really appreciative audience. So he sung it a third time. This time John noticed yet more about the music. He began to see how several of the effects were produced and that some parts were better than others. He wondered if it were not a trifle too long. The vision of the island was a little shadowy this time, and he did not take much notice of it. He put his arms around Media, and they lay cheek to cheek. He began to wonder if Mr. Halfway's would never end. And when at last the final passage closed with a sobbing break in the singer's voice, the old gentleman looked up and saw how the young people lay in one another's arms. Then he rose and said, "You have found your island. You have found it in one another's hearts." Then he tiptoed from the room, wiping his eyes. Ichabod. Media, I love you, said John. We have come to the real island, said Media. But oh, alas, said he, so long our bodies, why do we forbear? Else a great prince in prison lies, sighed she. No one else can understand the mystery of our love, said he. At that moment a brisk hobnailed step was heard, and a tall young man strode into the room, carrying a light in his hand. He had coal-black hair and a straight mouth, like the slit in a pillar box, and he was dressed in various kinds of metal wire. As soon as he saw them, he burst into a great guffaw. The lovers instantly sprang up and apart. Well, Brownie, said he, at your tricks again? Don't call me that name, said Media, stamping her foot. I have told you before not to call me that. The young man made an obscene gesture at her and then turned to John. I see that old fool of a father of mine has been at you. You have no right to speak that way of father, said Media. Then turning to John, her cheeks flaming, her breast heaving, she said, all is over. Our dream is shattered. Our mystery is profaned. I would have taught you all the secrets of love, and now you are lost to me forever. We must part. I shall go and kill myself. And with that she rushed from the room. Non est hic. Don't bother about her, said the young man. She has threatened that 100 times. She is only a brown girl, though. She doesn't know it. A brown girl, cried John. And your father? My father has been in the pay of the Brownies all his life. He doesn't know it. The old chucklehead calls them the muses or the spirit or some rot. In actual fact, he is by profession a pimp. And the island, said John, we'll talk about it in the morning. Ain't the kind of island you're thinking of. Tell you what, I don't live with my father and my precious sister. I live in Escropolis, and I am going back tomorrow. I'll take you down to the laboratory and show you some real poetry, not fantasies, the real thing. Thank you very much, said John. Then young Mr. Halfways found his room for him, and the whole of that household went to bed. 8 great promises. Gus Halfways was the name of Mr. Halfway's son. As soon as he rose in the morning, he called John down to breakfast with him so that they might start on their journey. There was no more to hinder them, for old Halfways was still asleep, and Media always had breakfast in bed. When they had eaten, Gus brought him into a shed beside his father's house and showed him a machine on wheels. What is that? What is this? Said John. My old boss, said young Halfways. Then he stood back with his head on one side and gazed at it for a bit, but presently he began to speak in a changed and reverent voice. She is a poem. She is the daughter of the spirit of the age. What was the speed of Atlanta to her speed? The beauty of Apollo to her beauty. Now beauty to John meant nothing save glimpses of his island, and the machine did not remind him of the island at all, so he held his tongue. Don't you see, said Gus, our fathers made images of what they called gods and goddesses, but they were really only brown girls and brown boys whitewashed, as anyone found out by looking at them too long. All self-deception and phallic sentiment, but here you have the real art. Nothing erotic about her, eh? Certainly not, said John, looking at the cog wheels and coils of spring. It is certainly not at all like a brown girl. It was in fact more like a nest of hedgehogs and serpents. I should say not, said Gus. Sheer power, eh? Speed, ruthlessness, austerity, significant form, eh? Also, and here he dropped his voice, very expensive indeed. Then he made John sit in the machine, and he himself sat beside him. Then he began pulling the levers about, and for a long time nothing happened. But at last there came a flash and a roar, and the machine bounded into the air and then dashed forward. Before John had got his breath, they had flashed across a broad thoroughfare, which he recognized as the main road, and were racing through the country to the north of it, a flat country of square stony fields divided by barbed wire fences. A moment later, they were standing still in a city where all the houses were built of steel. Here, number 3, the old gentleman looked up and saw how the young people lay in one another's arms. Oh, I think that probably was this one. And so book 3 is coming up, Through Darkest Zeitgeistium. Zeitgeistheim. Zeitgeistheim. Uh-oh. Oh, she said that a little bit too much. With too much fervor for the Fuhrer. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks so much here for joining me in the classroom. We are reading The Pilgrim's Regress by Clive Staples Lewis. C.S. Lewis. It was day 277 in the classroom. It is still November 26th, although we did not change that. So let's do that right now. I will be here tomorrow on Thanksgiving because, well, you know, I really was quite the social butterfly, right? And then all kinds of things happened, and now I'm isolated, just like a lot of people have been isolated in a lot of different ways, and showing you basically how to do it when there is government oppression, suppression, lies, dictators, criminals, mafia, and groupthink. Dr. Annette, and you know, that goes along with one percenters and all that kind of stuff. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I talked about the injustices of the justices. Auto update going on there. Okay, so Dr. Annette Feravich, thanks so much for joining me, and I am out for today. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I have really been care bearing this, and that's probably a good expression. It's like this tooth, and not really knowing what to do about that whole mess, since I have absolute no trust in the dental system, other than for being just sadists, masochists. All right, thanks so much. On that note, we are out of here. Let's get our titles up there. That was the Pilgrim's Regress, and that was day 277, where we are always working to make your mind, your body, and your spirit healthier. I actually have been doing some more of those Rife treatments, and they are helping. I just don't know if they are going to be the answer, and probably, and then what? Oh, your tooth cracked. Well, that's because that was so deep. And maybe you should have left those mercury fillings in. Downward spiral, that's for sure. But they are poisonous. And if they were poisonous, I don't know. But I do know that they gave me some really not to the most up-to-date healthcare care for my teeth, that's for sure. But I'm trying all the old-fashioned methods. And they do help. Tea with lots of cloves and cinnamon, and it's decaffeinated. It doesn't have any caffeine. Ginger. It's all delish. That is really, really delicious. And I gave up coffee, which has none of those great benefits. Okay, so Dr. Annette Feravich, where we are always bringing you some advice on keeping your lives healthy and mind, body, and spirit. Thanks.